Hey guys, alright, this part of the cell unit is going to discuss cell transport. When I'm talking about cell transport, I'm not talking about how the cell moves from one place to another. Instead, I'm talking about how materials like oxygen and really important things need to go into and out of the cell. Okay, so the thing that protects the cell is the cell membrane. And you guys remember, let me show you this picture here. Hopefully you guys can see it. On the inside of the cell is water, and on the outside of the cell is water. Okay, so this is your cell membrane. And what does it have to be made up of if water is on the inside and water is on the outside? Well, it has to be made up of a lipid layer. And you guys recall from the last unit that this layer that makes up the membrane is called a phospholipid bilayer. Okay, phospholipid bilayer, and these are the ones that kind of look like jellyfish. Okay, so if I were to expand this area, it would look like this all the way around. Okay, so remember that over here, the phosphate heads are hydrophilic, so they're attracted to water, and then the tails are hydrophobic, so they repel water. And the heads are always oriented either inside towards the water or outside towards the water. And the tails are always hidden inside the membrane. Okay, so it's an important structure so that the water can be brought in towards the membrane, but the lipid tails push it away. So that helps maintain this barrier all around the cell membrane. Now, the cell membrane's job is to control what goes in and out of the cell. Okay, so if it's something bad, it might try to go in, but the membrane's going to block it from coming in, so it's going to make it go back out. Kind of like, this is a silly example, but a bouncer at a club, right? They control who goes in and out. If you're not 21 years old, you get kicked out. Okay, so the membrane is very selective on what can go in and what can go out, and so it's referred to as a selectively permeable membrane. Permeable, if you break it down, like if you think of permit, does it permit things to go into the cell? Well, yes, some things, but not all things, and so that's why we say it is selectively permeable. Now, there are some things that need to go in, but the membrane will not allow it. So what's embedded throughout the membrane are these little protein channels or protein carriers. Okay, so sometimes there's something that needs to go in where the membrane is going to reject it, so it needs a helper protein to allow it to go in. Okay, so we'll talk about these kind of things in just a minute. Because the membrane is so important on controlling what goes into the cell and out of the cell, it is what is most important in helping the cell maintain stable conditions. And that word for stable conditions is homeostasis. Okay, so the membrane is one of the most important structures of the cell in helping it maintain homeostasis. Okay, so let's look at some pictures. So again, this is showing that there is water on the inside and water on the outside. These heads are your phosphate heads, as you can see here, which are hydrophilic, and then the tails are hydrophobic. Okay, so the water is going to be attracted to the heads on the inside and on the outside, but the lipid tails are going to push it away. It's going to reject the water. Okay, so it helps keep this membrane, helps it keep the barrier so that we can keep water on the inside and we can keep water on the outside. Remember, if this membrane was made up of polar things, it would just dissolve and we wouldn't have cells, we wouldn't have membranes, we would just be kind of a big glob of gunk, I guess. Okay, here's another picture, more of a 3D type image. Remember, cells are not just a flat structure, they have dimensions. So this picture kind of shows that. All of these purple circular structures are the phosphate heads, and all these squiggly things are the lipid tails. Again, hydrophilic on the top and the bottom because they're water loving, they're attracted to the water, but then the lipid tails are hydrophobic. Right, here's another picture. This is more symbolic of what it looks like. So all the yellow that you see are the phosphate heads, and then looking at a cross section you can see the tails. But remember, I told you sometimes things need to go into the cell, but the membrane will not allow it. So things are trying to go in from the outside to the inside or from the inside to the outside. But sometimes it's not allowed. So you have these special proteins embedded all throughout. You can see them down in this picture as well. These proteins will allow certain things to go through. Okay, so these are very important. Sometimes they're protein channels that just kind of open up, creating a channel for things to pass through. And sometimes they act like carriers, so they'll kind of open up like this, surround the material, and then open it to the other side to let it out. So we'll pretend this marker is like that. So it opened up to allow it in, surrounds it, and then lets it go through to the other side. So those are protein carriers, protein channels, things like that. Okay, so again, the membrane is selectively permeable. It will let some things go through, but not all things. So some things that need to go through might have to go through a protein channel or carrier in order to get to the other side.